So I am not a morning person, so respect for everyone being here. I'm also not a person that tends to be in front of the camera or out here. I work with a lot of artists, I do a lot of things, but a lot of my work is behind the scenes. So I appreciate you guys kind of rolling with this thing that's a bit new for me. So I'm a little nervous, but I'm excited to share some things. I'm definitely gonna go a bit of a different direction. So instead of showing you a bunch of pie charts or talking about business models, I'd like to talk more about how I evolved my work, and I ended up in, I think, a much healthier place. So through this short time, I'd like you guys to ask yourselves two questions. How are you spending your time, and then what's motivating that? So is that happiness, fear, sadness, or love? Because I spent a lot of time here thinking about what the most important resource we all have, and to me, that's time. So it's about investing yourself, it's about knowing yourself, and it's about setting up healthy boundaries so you can avoid what you don't want to do. And I think for me, it was about explicitly separating my value as a human from my output, from my work. Let's see. So I'm going to share a few words and some images I took along the way. And I'm happy to answer any specific, actual, financial or money or investment, actual questions, in the Q&A. And I'll stick around a little bit after to do that as well. You've already helped me a lot face a fear of doing this right here, so I'm just very appreciative to everybody. Thank you. I feel very far away from where I started my career in music, if I can call it that. It feels funny to call it a career. There wasn't really a plan. I fell into it by following curiosities and just working with other like-minded people. And the theme of that was really about hard work, showing up, and kind of getting things done. So that's, I think, what separated a lot of the things that I was doing as a kid from what I'm doing now. So I grew up in St. Paul, not too far away from here. And from a very young age, my mom taught photo at MCAD. So I got to sit with people and listen how they would talk about art. Not in a defensive way, not in a judgy way, not in kind of a snarky way, but in a way that was really meant and intended to build value for you as an artist. So having that mindset as in an early time helped me understand how to speak to people honestly and openly, and sometimes very critically about their work to help them hopefully achieve their goals instead of just the other side of that, which would maybe just be niceties, right? Oh, you're doing great. This is great. Fantastic. It's how do we actually want to improve and grow? So I got a lot of that from an early age. So the other thing I was doing as a kid was I was spending a lot of time learning the ins and outs of computers. So I've always been more comfortable having a logical set of outcomes. I love math. I love exploring them. Computers are pretty easy in a sense. You know what the output's going to be, and when there isn't that expected output, there's a lot of fun figuring out, well, how did that happen? How can I solve it? It's some things that made sense, because a lot of things in my childhood didn't make sense. So from time to time being hungry or being worried about the roof over your head, those things didn't make sense to me, but computers did. So that just kind of helped me learn a lot about how to get around certain constraints that we are either given or we give to ourselves. So that all kind of reinforced my want to work. Having those constraints on my life forced me, pushed me, made me really want to make my own way. I wanted to earn my own money, I wanted to be my own man, I wanted to control my space as much as I could. So my adventure in music, and these are some images I've just kind of taken along the way, just kind of as background here. It started from working in kitchens, and then the front of house, and then delivering pizzas. You can learn a lot about customer service and logistics from the food service industry. And then it turned into working at a record store, meeting artists through that, formalizing kind of a loose collective into a record label that eventually failed, and that's okay, I just learned some things from it. And then just along the way, just kind of continuing to push myself in this creative space. There's some folks here that I work with at a magazine called, I'm gonna get roasted after this, just so everyone's aware, they can roast this shit out of me. But There's some folks here that I worked with at a magazine called Life Sucks Die. There's, which eventually turned to this other thing called Burlesque Design. Shared a space with them, did some work with them. So I've had this really kind of meandering, weird path to where I am now. So a lot of these slides that were just shown, these are artists that I work with through Rhymesayers. So when I started there over 16 years ago, which is kind of crazy to me because who does anything for 16 years, right? Like, you know, a lot of jobs don't last more than a year. So it feels kind of weird to even just say that out loud. I had no idea where it would take me, but what I knew it would be was a chance to build something from the ground up. From the first interview, I could just tell that these were very like-minded people. These were people that wanted to work very hard, and they wanted to protect the value of the artist's work and create a space where one didn't exist to actually succeed in that creative enterprise. So early on in the role, I was super headstrong. I took all the things I learned as a kid. I wanted to make a point. I was going to show my value. I was going to change things. And so I just wanted to make it all happen. I had a huge chip on my shoulder, and I actually just realized this a couple months ago, that watching my mom, who was an artist, struggle as a kid really taught me that there's something very beautiful and wonderful in me that wants to protect and create value for artists, just because of my own specific thing that I faced as a kid. So I really spent a lot of time focusing on the boring stuff. I focused on the infrastructure, the finances, the royalties. It's not cute. It's not exciting. It's not what, hey, I work in the music industry. People ask me, well, what do I need to know? I'm like, Microsoft Excel. And they're like, this is not the conversation I want to have. I'm over it. So I spent a lot of time like figuring out how to purchase a building, do a remodel. What is our distribution deal? How do you negotiate with these big conglomerates, these corporations on the East and West Coast? How do you actually show your value? How do you find that when you're negotiating with these huge entities? And so a lot of this experience that I've had over the years, kind of falling into it, saying, well, this needs to get done, I'll go figure it out. I really liked that. And that was kind of exciting for me at the time. And that was kind of a recurring theme in my work, was just to figure it out and make it happen, with or without the time or the budget that was needed. And so here in Minneapolis, there's a ton of artists, there's a ton of venues, but there's just not a music industry per se, right? So we ended up building the tools that we needed. So we're making our own merch, we opened our own retail store, we created our own music festival, and along the way, as much as we could, the intent of ours was to bring a lot of other good local people with us. So it's like, who else is doing some work? How can we kind of make Minneapolis shine? As we grow, we want to bring others with us, because then if we create the ecosystem, it just creates sustainability for us. Success is not a limited resource. So a lot of people get kind of tight when they're talking about business, when they're talking about their strategy, like, yo, I have the one way to do this. I don't actually think that exists. I don't think that it's a limited resource. I think it takes the actual craft, the time, the attention, all these other things that go into it. So I'm quite happy to bring other people or make spaces for them to succeed on their own. It really doesn't detract from my success. And to me, one of the things that I really learned early on in this space, as much as I was putting my nose to the grindstone, is that excellence is quality delivered. And that to me means, what's the idea that can actually be executed, not what's the best idea. And that was kind of hard for me, because I'm like this kind of inquisitive, creative person. I was like, I got a lot of ideas. Most of them are horrible, okay? And I tried a lot of them. Exactly. So to me, it's like, which ones are the ones that you can actually execute and actually deliver on what you want? And that's what I'm going to kind of get into a bit more. And I know I breezed over a lot of stuff that I did. It's hard to put 10 years into 2 minutes. But a few years ago, I was facing burnout. I really didn't know why. I liked my job. I thought I was happy. I was healthy. I was well-fed. Had an apartment. That was the dream. The kid was living the dream. And I'm really good at work. I work really hard, but that's all I wanted to do. there was actually no play, and I ended up feeling very dull, like just dull. I didn't feel sharp. My wit wasn't what I thought it was. I wasn't remembering moments. I wasn't actually present. Days kind of turned into weeks, and it was all just raw horsepower. There wasn't even very specific goals for myself personally. It was just sort of whatever it took to get these things we wanted to get done. And that was a perfect recipe for burnout. So let's not do that. All this responsibility that I'd taken on with this money and with this responsibility, it kind of pushed me into a really serious place. And I'll show you some photos in a bit. You'll see it on my face. I was carrying it, what I thought, very well, but I was just putting myself on the hook for everything. Everything felt like an obligation. Every move that we would make. Well, fuck, if this doesn't happen, this artist is going to be affected in this way. It was just so personal to me. It was almost too personal. I made the work too personal. I hadn't established healthy boundaries. And that's a thing that some people might say, well, I want to be closer to this. I want to give you everything. I want to do this. Boundaries actually help you, I think, see your goals in a more clear, concise way and actually show up in the way that other people might want you to. So to me, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's, I think, a super healthy thing. It was actually just getting in the way of the success of our business because I was trying to do it all. I was holding that like headstrong, I'm gonna prove it to everybody kind of thing. It wasn't working. So, and that's when life stepped in. And sometimes it does. And you just have to be able to recognize it. So I hadn't seen my dad, I hadn't seen my grandpa or his side of the family in about 20 years. And a cousin reached out to me and said, hey, you know what? He's getting older. He's probably gonna pass soon. So I made a decision to go see him, say my goodbyes, make some peace. And I wasn't really prepared for what I saw. And what I saw was this man who was, like most men in my life, very stoic and very strong. I'm sorry. He had a really tough exterior. And the Alzheimer's that he was dealing with ended up washing away all the things that made him this hard husk of a man. And what I realized in that moment, or I didn't know I realized in that moment, was I was just on this path to become him. I was going to be a man. I was going to provide, I was going to show up, and I was going to be serious. There was no room for love or emotions or mistakes or these other things that actually, I think, apply to anybody that's living a rich life. And so he didn't know it at the time. He didn't even know who I was, but he was hugging me and laughing with me, and it kind of showed me that I was going down that same path. And it actually kind of gave me permission to change. So it was this really wonderful thing. As hard as it might be to consider, it was a really wonderful thing. So after that shock wore off, I just started realizing that I needed to do something to change. And so I thought about these fears that were holding me back. So let's talk about fear. I think it's a great motivator to not speak from the heart, to not do the hard thing. And it kind of keeps you in this place where you continue doing what you're doing, maybe just to survive. But I found richness on the other side of fear. So my way of facing fear was to reflect. So I went back through old journals, I read things that I'd written, and I found these very similar struggles coming back and forth and back and forth, and I just wasn't actually facing them or doing anything with them. The other thing that I did is I reflected through photo. So I'll show you some kind of reflections on time that I found, and it was like really about like how I was spending my time. And I'll include some references at the end of the presentation if you want to like go a little deeper if you're curious. But this is what I looked like at the time, okay? And I thought I was like, this is what I was meant to be doing. But that face was so heavy, so serious, and behind it, it was those burdens, it was that obligation that I was holding. And even if you look at my desk, like that's, it's fucking chaos, right? So, there's some like snacks in the back, you know, I got some, there's those things right up here, if you guys aren't aware, those are CDs. So, I went back through all these photos I had taken, right? So along the way, I was taking all these photos, kind of in a serendipitous way. I wasn't actually treating myself like an artist, but I found 3 themes around time in my work. And so that image that you just saw, and this is from an old farmhouse that my grandma grew up in, down in southern Minnesota. And what I was confronted with was these old decaying structures, these discarded things, and it was actually quite beautiful to me. It wasn't sad that she had lost this thing that existed with her. It was more of a reflection for me that, oh, my time here is insignificant. My problems are not that big. It's not actually that big of a deal. It gave me a lot of permissiveness because it just kind of showed me, it gave me some perspective on what I was facing. So this next little series here was a reflection on myself. So time and mortality. So this was like me taking pictures of my face almost every day. I didn't know why. I didn't know why I was actually compulsed to kind of do this, but I wanted to sort of track my time, just inherently. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But what was interesting is, as I was sitting there laying out like hundreds of these images, which is weird enough, right? Like, you saw the picture, like, what have I done? Was something was staring right back at me, and it was, what did I feel at these times? Because I thought I felt happy. I was crushing it at work. Let's fucking go. Let's get it. Like those kind of things, right? But like, exactly. But internally, it was melancholy, which is defined as I wrote it down here somewhere, it's just a sense of, it's a pensive sadness without much reason why. So what I found in all of this is that I might not have actually been happy, and it kind of brought me right back to what I was doing with my grandpa. I was just mirroring. I was putting up this armor. This to me was my defense against the harsh realities of the world. So I was going to be tough. I was going to show this world that you can't stop me. I'm going to build this. I'm going to do these things. But it actually so what it did to me is it kind of motivated me to be more open, to take more risks, to do things like this today. I don't know a lot of you, but it kind of helped push me into this space where I wanted to be vulnerable without being naive. And that's a really wonderful, interesting place to live your life if you can. And I don't have a recipe. There's not one way to do it. I think we all have our ways, but this is my very narcissistic way to do it. So this last reflection on time was about solitude. So to me now, silence is a bit of a luxury, right? So whether that's self-inflicted noise, whether it's like looking at your phones, and I'm not actually really mad at that, but just the fact of like how much noise do we bring into our lives on a daily basis? So I went looking for solitude. I went looking for a space to reflect. And it was so interesting what happens when you give yourself the time, when you turn off the cellular or you disconnect a bit, the thoughts that you have in your head, and then allowing yourself to sort of process that. And what do I like? And why is this here? What is the purpose of this thought? And do I want to accept it or let it go? So these 3 reflections on time really helped me understand a lot more of what I was, or who I was, and then also what I wanted to be. So I realized that these fears were holding me back, and 2 stood out. So one was a fear of failure. I didn't want to disappoint people. Ultimately, I didn't want to disappoint myself. I wanted to make the thing happen, do the thing, deliver, make it happen. And that was kind of tied to this fear of being imperfect, and spoiler alert, I am far from perfect. So it was a tough one to figure out back then. And I can just do my best. So, but I had to learn that the hard way too. So I spent a little bit of time, tried to develop an artistic practice by creating these 3 reflections. And I got it done. I wrote some words. I pulled some things together. I edited my work. I was kind of starting to become kind of my own little artist here. I work with artists. I was kind of doing my own thing. And I came home one day, and my apartment had been broken into. And I don't have much stuff, but what was gone were the drive that I was using to create this work, because some of this stuff I don't actually put on the cloud. I just kind of do it myself. And then the backup drives that were right next to it were gone. So I lost those maybe it's a good thing not having thousands of photos of myself, at the end of the day. But what I lost was sort of the rich depth, the opportunity to show exactly what I wanted, this perfect demonstration of this art project. So I lost that. But in a really fucked up kind of cool way, it actually forced me to just face the reality of the project that I was trying to complete, which was that accepting imperfection in your work, whether it's your artistic practice or your actual work, is kind of a nice thing. It gives you some permission to maybe try something different or maybe get a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So in a very long, roundabout way, that actually ended up helping me. And so I eventually had some ease with it. It took a little while, but I eventually did find some ease with it. So the other fear that I kind of realized was that work was my only value as a human. And I think I'm not going to go on a diatribe about what America is versus this or whatever, our culture, this and that. But I think that for me at least, work was my value. My output was implicitly tied to how I felt that day. If I crushed it at work, I was feeling good. If I wasn't, I was stressed out. And I bring that into whatever relationships I had, friendships, partners and whatnot. So that lack of security was driving me to just blindly do more, just more. I wasn't focusing on work that I was actually good at. I just wanted to be everything to everyone. In any scenario, I wanted to be able to make it happen. That's just not possible. So learning more of who I am through this particular process, through my reflective process, and through talking with friends and becoming more open and vulnerable with my feelings, that actually kind of helped me have some permission to understand that my value is more than just my work. And so that's a thing. A lot of these things are things that I feel like as maybe a creative economy or a creative community, we might all kind of jointly feel. So after the facing the fears, it took a little bit of time, and so what I did is I just tried to approach these things little by little, just accepting them as I could. And I did take a lot of risks in friendships. I see a lot of people that I know here, and I appreciate all of those conversations that we had, the easy ones, the fun ones, and the hard ones. It really meant a lot to me. So now my work has changed because I faced these fears. So now to me it's more about being a leader and providing space for other people to succeed and to bring in the actual skills and qualities that they possess. And then I can just spend my time supporting them and defending their time and being a good representative for them. It's totally changed our business. So whereas I thought I was doing the right thing by doing it all, I was actually holding us back. And that was the biggest lesson to me in all of this, is the more I let go, the more I understood where I did actually provide value, the further we all got for this creative enterprise that we're doing. And a lot of people talk about being busy. I'm so busy, I'm this. I'm over that. Because to me, when you're busy, you can't actually take the time to listen to yourself and improve and make corrections. So for me, being busy isn't the point. Doing the work you want to do, I think, is the point. And a lot of that came from setting healthy boundaries. So there's just a couple of things that now I'm doing. So when we build team and when we consider these things, there's really just 3 things that I look for that you can't teach. And that's creativity, hard work, and integrity. The rest of it, I'll take risks. I've taken many risks. There's some folks here that work with me, and I'll take a lot of risks on people if they have those 3 characteristics. The rest of it, I feel like you can learn, so I wouldn't necessarily hold yourself back from certain opportunities. I think it's just really important to understand the value that you provide. So this talk was an exercise to reinforce my new work approach. Moving forward, to make sharing my personal and my professional work a little bit easier. And I asked for a lot of help along the way, and I received a lot. So I'm very thankful for that. So I appreciate you guys all spending your time with me today. And I do feel very, very hopeful and positive that we can create the lives we want. So you've all helped me grow today, and I hope some of my story was helpful to you. And so I'd like to ask you those 2 questions again. How are you spending your time? And then what's motivating that for you? So I just want to say a quick couple shout outs, to, to CreativeMornings for the platform, and to all the volunteers that helped today, to Glam Doll for supporting our collective sweet tooth. And as a token of my appreciation to all of you, there are some flowers in the other room. They're actually red roses, and I won't make a bad bachelor joke right now, but they're, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But like, but they're yeah, I see you, Darian. But it's there if you want it as possibly a symbol for you to reflect upon. A little bit of beauty for you, and maybe a little bit of a tool for you to just kind of understand the inherent value that you all have. Thank you.